It's a privilege to work with an icon like Bob, who brings dignity and respect to those we're trying to serve. Bob's sort of trademark is his commitment to going into the communities themselves, the communities we're trying to serve, finding leaders in those communities and empowering them with whatever wraparound support they need in order to be effective. And the reason he's here and in Colorado right now is that we are embarking on a program through our family foundation trying to identify those leaders in the communities. And when we talk about community, it's not necessarily just limited to geography. It might be a community of common interests. It might be people working together to help substance abusers or teenage pregnancy, whatever the common challenge is, we treat that as community. And we're trying to find people inside those communities who best understand how to solve them or how to address them and give them the kind of support, as I said, the wraparound support they need in order to get their job done. Parents' Challenge that Deborah runs so well is built around that very same principle. We try and support families who want to select the best possible education for their children. We don't tell them what it is because they know better than we do what's in the best interest of their children. The same principle applies to what we're here tonight to discuss. So if you don't, I'm not here to promote Fox News, but if you watch Fox News, you would see Bob on once a week, and in some cases more often. The point of my bringing that up is that he's a national figure, a national leader who he just flew in from California. You're going to be on Fox Sunday morning. This is a man of incredible accomplishment and incredible impact. He's a man with soul, with commitment, and if there's anybody who can help us solve today's problems, which seem so overwhelming, it is Bob Woodson. He's been doing it for 50 years. He came out of the civil rights movement, as he will explain to you. But today he's in the business of helping grassroots leaders make the most out of their skills and help the most people in the most profound ways. So it is a great honor, privilege to have Bob in Colorado Springs and here with us tonight, Bob Woodson.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you. I thought I'd just walk you a little bit through, but I'm a founder of a group called the Woodson Center. It used to be the Center for Neighborhood Enterprise. In July will be our 40th anniversary. And what we do is we help low-income grassroots leaders. There are 2,500 people, leaders in 39 states of all racial groups that we help. But let me tell you a little bit my own journey. I was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the youngest of 5 children. My dad died when I was 9, leaving my mother with a 5th grade education to educate 4 children. She had to work full time, which meant that I had to rely on my fellows as my family. And so it was in a rough neighborhood, but we had a lot of love and we had parents taking care of kids. But when when I was 17, all my friends, there were 6 of us, we're still friends today. 3 are dead, 3 alive. But when they graduated and went on, I was by myself, and handle it. You can't stay in your neighborhood where I grew up unaffiliated. So I dropped out of school and when I turned 17 and went into the military. Okay, thanks. Went into the military and did all the things that people do. And then I was in segregation. I was stationed in Mississippi, so I knew what that was like. But anyway, after I went through that and finished my education in the military and came out, I went to college. And working on my undergraduate degree, I worked at the juvenile jail where I was locked behind 3 doors with just 2 of us, with 65 juvenile offenders. I mean, in there from gang murder to truancy, they all got treated the same with no programs. And they were the same kind of kids I grew up with. So I worked a 4 to 12 shift, so I would, when administration leave, I would take them to unsecured area of the jail because they were better facilities and did things with them. And if I trusted them and they trusted me, because if they had acted out, I would have lost my job. And so they never violated the trust in me. And one day I came home, one of these evenings, we were bringing the trash cans back, and all 65 of the kids stood up and applauded. And I turned on my heels. I started crying and acting crazy, and I didn't know what was going on with me. And I realized that I had a burning bush experience before I knew what a burning bush was. 6 of these kids that I knew that if I had the money, I would have adopted them into my home and become their dad. So I decided that I was trained in the space, I used to fly in the space program, and I was getting a degree in undergraduate in math. Instead, I said, I got to devote my life to serving these kids. So I turned around and got a master's in social work and got involved in the civil rights movement. But I got upset with the movement because a lot of people who sacrificed most didn't benefit from the change. I had people who were janitors, hairdressers, picketing outside of a pharmaceutical company, and when they desegregated, they hired 9 black PhD chemists, and we asked them to join this movement. They said they got this job because they were qualified, not because of what you did. I realized I was in the wrong struggle. So I left the civil rights movement and began to work on behalf of low-income people of all races. And I recognized, as Dr. King said, it's not enough to have the right to live where you want to live. You got to have the means to exercise that right. So just having doors of opportunity open don't mean anything if you don't have the skills and that you need to walk through and take advantage of it. And so I have spent all my life doing that. And then something happened in the mid-70s that really changed my life. My city was the youth gang capital of America. They used to publish the gang deaths right next to the Vietnam deaths. And nobody could stop it. The police couldn't, until I met a woman and a husband, Falaka Fatah and David. They had 6 boys living 3 blocks from where I grew up, in a little house. She discovered that the oldest of us, a 15-year-old boy, was a gang member. And so, the oldest of her 6 sons was a gang member. And she said, why don't you bring your friends home? Well, her husband was an OG, so he negotiated so these boys could come to the house. She said, she stood up all night talking. She said, I don't know anything about gangs, I know something about family. So why don't you all move in with us? She said, there are 15 of you, 6 boys, took out all the furniture, put mattresses all over, crazy. And so she said, if we're going to live together, we got to be peaceful, we all have to work, we got to be clean. And so they started to work, and in 1 year or 2 years, they retired her mortgage. And then when kids in the neighborhood found out there was sanctuary from gang membership, they all knocked on the door. And then the next year, they bought a house across the street. They bought the house next door. Next thing you know, she has 6 houses, 100 boys from gang members from all over the city. So she said, there's peace among us. If we can live in harmony, why can't the rest of the city? So she said, well, why don't we have a citywide gang summit that would invite all the active gang members? None of the churches would open their doors. The city officials said it would create chaos in the city, but the Quakers opened their doors down on 4th and Arch Street. And it happened on New Year's Day, and they canceled the Mother's Day parade for the first time because they said this is going to be chaos. Long story short, she brought them all together. They signed a peace pact and said anybody wearing Sister Fatah's picture on their shirt has sanctuary and passage. We went from 48 gang deaths down to 2 in 1 year. So what I did, I was blessed to follow her around for 2 years because I was working at a think tank, and I wrote down all the things that she did, all the principles that she followed, and I authored a book. And I would write a chapter, and I gave it to David and Flock. I said, is this what you do? She said, yes. So that book is called A Summons to Life. What she then equipped me to do is I knew what to look for all over the country. So I went to Puerto Rico, I went to Chicago, I went to New York, I went to different cities armed with this information, and I found the Sister Fatah and the Davids, about 7 of them, and I asked them to come with 2 young people whose lives they have transformed and redeemed. And we sat in a conference room at this think tank, and I asked these young people to explain why about your path towards redemption and peace. And the first 2 hours, they weren't saying very much. And I said, well, maybe these young people can't articulate what changed them. So I told Fat Rob Allen, was one of the gang members that I knew from Philly. I said, Fat Rob, this ain't working. So what can we do? He said, why don't you adults pull away from the table and let me handle this? So when they came back in, he said, we are now in war council. Instead of ordering guns and what strategy, we're going to talk about what made us peaceful. These young people talked for 5.5 hours, didn't even break for lunch. They had so much insight to offer. And so I did another book. And the reason that it was popular is because I stayed out of it. I let them write it. I just wrote it down. But they wrote it. And so the Woodson Center then was based upon all of the lessons that I learned through that journey. I said, I have to get an organization that does what Sister Fatah did. And so my organization is fashioned on that model. And what I've done is I go around the country and in different drug-infested, crime-ridden neighborhoods. I'll give you an example and introducing my colleagues. In Washington, D.C., I learned how to innovate, and I was working with a group called the Alliance of Concerned Men. These are ex-offenders who have the trust and confidence of the young people on the streets of Washington. But I said to them, there's no way we can measure the impact of what you do because it's all over the place. So, and then a 12-year-old boy was killed in an area called Benning Terrace, a simple city by Curtis. They had 53 murders in the 5 square block area in 2 years. The police were afraid to go. And so I said to these alliance, I said, God has made the choice for you. Go back up in there and bring the warring factions to my office downtown. And they came in separate vans, bulletproof vests on. Sister Fatah taught me that you always have a meal when young people come together because they fight when they're drinking together, not when they're eating together. So we had a meal, and we began with prayer, but they wouldn't touch each other, so we stood in between them. And they said to us, no one ever asked us to be peaceful. And then when we took them on that journey of how that beef started and all, and we asked them, would they be peaceful? I'm not going to take all the time. The long and short of it is, they had a peace treaty. The same young men who were terrorizing the community went back to rebuild it. We didn't have a single gang murder in 12 years. We took the lessons that we learned and exported it to the city of Dallas and other places. But it was a struggle getting people to accept it because the people providing this didn't have college degrees, and some of them were ex-offenders, and we had to get waivers in order for them. But they had the trust and confidence of the people, and so we were able to bring down that. Curtis Watkins was my stand-up Curtis. Curtis used to be a part of the problem in the city. And Curtis was one of the first people to do the same thing on another side of the city. and has been with us for many, many years, responsible for the violence-free zone. And Sylvia Bennett Stones is here because she heads a group called Voices of Black Mothers United. She lost her daughter to street violence, and she has reached out to 2,500 other black mothers who've lost street violence. And they are speaking for themselves. They're not letting anybody on TV speak for what's best for the people in the community. And so the people suffering the problems are the ones who the Woodson Center works with, building on solutions coming from the bottom up and the inside out. And we've got a plan to make our communities peaceful as we did in Bending Terrace. So the whole Woodson Center, based on the fact that the people, whether you're talking about job development, education, choice, the people closest to the problem are the real experts. And so what we are telling people, if you want to help, don't come into no low-income community assuming nothing is there before you came. Right? Don't come in like that. And you can't study by studying failure. Don't come in asking how many people are dropping out of school or in jail on drugs. Find out how many in there are not doing that. And then finding out in those households where that's not going on, that's the source of innovation. And you need to go in and take what's working to apply it to the section of the neighborhood that is not working. And so that's kind of been the premise of what we do. We've got a pretty good a track record of reducing violence. Also, we have a violence-free zone it's in 14 schools, Curtis, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Now it's a part of the school budget. And so I can tell you the details of how it works. But basically, young people can be discouraged from destroying themselves if you empower their peers to be moral mentors and character coaches. We have maybe, if you have a school of 1,000 kids, 10% of them are calling all the shots. If you get to that 10%. So who's best to do it? We take people who used to be a part of the problem and make them part of the solution. And they're the ones that have the trust and confidence of the kids. So if a child has a difference or beef with somebody in the school, they're not going to tell the counselor or the resource officer, but they will come to a youth advisor. And then what they do is find out what the beef is, and then we have maybe a mediation room right near the dining room, and you may see 5 groups of young people sitting around with an adult. They're mediating their difference so it doesn't end up in violence. And just recently, that approach, the Alliance created in one of those violent neighborhoods in Washington. They went through 3 months without a single incident of violence. But yet, nobody pays attention to it. We're trying to bring attention to it. Okay, I'll be glad to answer any questions. Huh?
Talk about the book.
Yeah, and part of, as I said, when I learned from Sister Fatah, but I have a second book called The Triumphs of Joseph, and that is, I talk about what role rich people have, or people with means, in dealing with low-income people. And if you look in the Bible, the story of Joseph, Joseph was 17 years old, betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, but he never became bitter, and he became the best slave in the house of Potiphar. Then he went to prison because he was accused of rape. He didn't do it. Again, he never became bitter, and he became the best inmate, and he ran to prison. And Pharaoh had this dream that he couldn't answer, and Joseph came up, and then he told Pharaoh it'd be 7 years of plenty, and then Pharaoh appointed him the overseer. But yet, Joseph came up with solutions for problems. He could have said, well, my brothers betrayed me, so therefore I'm going to be angry at them or bitter and try to seek revenge of them, but he didn't. God took revenge out of his heart. And so Joseph ended up supporting policies and approaches that saved not only the brothers who betrayed him, but the Egyptians who enslaved him. But we wouldn't know about Joseph if he was bitter or if he was just complaining all the time. Okay? So that's the model that the Woodson Center works on now, that we bring people with means together with people who have needs, but they come together as peers to help, okay? Any,
So, questions, comments?
Mr. Woodson, the first question is, did you bring any books?
did we bring some? Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And second question is, and if you have a question, just raise your hand, and this tall fellow will come over with the microphone. The second question is, what have been the greatest obstacles in creating change when you first began this work?
Most people, both left and right of center, believe that the best people to help people are people with college degrees. It's elitism. This idea that only people with college degrees are the best ones to provide services to people. And so when you try to get a grant, they want to know how many degrees someone has. Now you can be a mother and raise 5 children successfully and not have a college degree. Someone else can have a degree in early childhood education and hate kids and get certified and get certified to take care of kids. But a mom who raised them successfully, who got a reputation, can't do it. And so the biggest obstacle is that people think that certification is the same as qualification. So we have to fight that. Because most of my most effective gang members who are now ambassadors of peace, they haven't been to college. But none of the college graduates can come down and negotiate on a Friday night. Somebody's ready to shoot the place up. Yeah. As I say, 80% of my closest friends have letters in front of their names, not in behind them. They're X something. Numbers. No, letters.
Mr. Woodson, first of all, thank you for gracing Colorado Springs with your presence. It's a real honor to have you here. Thank you so much. Just a few seconds ago, you were talking about your accomplishments and how they're not recognized. How much importance do you place on recognition of the success you're experiencing every day? Listening to you, I assume that you're so successful and you get so much accomplished, you really don't need the outside world per se to acknowledge that. Do you place a huge importance on recognition? Does that help you with the momentum of what you do?
Mm-hmm. Well, the recognition that I seek is certainly not for myself, but I think I'm a representative of the people that I serve. And so so that if I can raise, and I raise money through recognition. And so when we raised $1 million last year, we gave 500,000 of it to 100 groups, 5,000 each. So half the money we raised, we gave it out to mini grants to grassroots leaders all over the country as seed capital, but they had to use it to improve themselves. We gave them $2,500 when they offered us a little plan of what they're going to do with it. And when they gave us the completed work, we gave them the balance. And that has really stimulated. And every month we communicate through Zoom, so we share our successes with one another. So having the money nationally to be able to afford staff, but our whole orientation is serving those in those communities. We refuse to be the kind of organization like others who collect all this money in the name of helping people, and the people don't see it. So we have to be the model of what we say we stand for. So you know, I don't get off by being on TV. I get off because it enables me, therefore, to raise the money necessary. And while I'm there, I talk about the people I serve. I don't talk about what Bob Woodson does or how he feels or where he went on vacation. I talk about what our folks do to overcome great odds. So you can't learn anything from studying failure except how to create failure. We don't spend enough time celebrating the people who are achieving. We got a black mom who has 2 girls. They were sleeping in the back of their car and in a homeless shelter, and they were studying by the light of a cell phone. And one of them graduated from high school, salutatorian, and the other valedictorian, and they went on to college. Well, we ought to find out how she did that. And there are other stories of an 18-year-old black homeless young man who borrowed his brother's bike and bicycled for 6 hours across the state of Georgia and pitched a tent on the community college campus at 3 in the morning. And these 2 white police officers came up and found out what he was about, put him up in a motel. Then he got a job washing dishes at a pizza parlor. And then when somebody posted on a GoFundMe, they raised $93,000 in 3 days for him. And he thanked everybody, and the president of the college let him move on campus, and now he says he's going to use it to pay his tuition. He is a hero. It takes homeless, 18-year-old, hot August, riding across 6 hours. We ought to celebrate people who show that kind of grit and determination.
Mr. Woodson, can you share about our friend Twin, who's gone on to be with the Lord, but Twin was a perfect example of what you recognize as recognition and how Twin acknowledged your presence in the community.
Yeah, when we stopped these boys from fighting, and we do this all over the country. I can take you to Hartford, Connecticut, Dallas, Texas. We have people where I can show you islands of excellence and where people were predatory. And the reason that they remained peaceful for 20 plus years is because all of us said to them, if you pledge your life to life, we will pledge the rest of our life to you. So they all have our cell numbers. One of them, Benny Terrace, when I'm going somewhere, he drives me. And my son died 19 years ago of a tragic accident. He was 39 years old. And Curtis and I had been to funerals with them because sometimes when their friends get killed, they want to retaliate, but we have to be at the funeral to hug them, right, Curtis, and tell them, don't do it. And when my son died, all 18 of them came to the service because they wanted to know whether I was going to pass the test that I had given them. And when they all encircled my family with their smile on their face, their message was very clear. You have more than one son. You have 18 sons. That's the kind of love that we give from these kids. But that's the kind of love that they give back to you that can save your life. Because I felt like taking my life until these boys said to me, you are father to more than just one son. We need you. So my commitment to this isn't out of some program. This is a life journey.
How did Twin show his commitment to the community as far as
Twin was one of those guys that I was real close to. Each of us took 5 boys to become fathers to him. Twin had never finished high school, but he would always bring somebody who was a talent in the community, 5 or 6 people who were doing well in high school and wanted to go to college but didn't have the means to do so. And Twin's way of describing them, he said, they don't talk like they from around here. That was his way of saying it. And in each of those cases that he would bring to me, we made sure that we found the money to support these young people to go on to college from that. So it's been a love affair we have with the kids we serve. Yes, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Woodson. It's a pleasure to see you personally. I followed you on Tucker and on the Ingo Mango and listened to you. And I also looked you up, and I've been really often to your work. And you have inspired me with the work I do in my community. So it's a pleasure to see you face to face. But I would like this evening if you could give us your thoughts on CRT, the critical race theory that is currently going on. And I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Critical race theory is probably the worst thing that happened to this country, because it used to be called stereotyping. That all white people are of a certain, if you're white, then that defines who you are. If you're black, it defines who you are. And what they're saying, critical race theory, is every differences that blacks have is associated with racism, and therefore all white people are bad and all black people are heroes or something. And the worst thing about it, I guess, if the way we were, suppose we had all these gang suits, and we told them your problem is institutional racism. Tell me how that would have produced the kind of peace that we had in that community. See, when someone tells me about we ought to have critical critical grace theory, I call it. We ought to be placing race with grace. That's what we're pursuing. But to look at life through, I fought hard and went to jail in the civil rights movement to fight against what people are giving me segregation again. That's what I fought against. Dr. King said we ought to be judged by the content of your character. There are some people who look like me who don't share anything in common with me. I spoke to 1,000 black men, and I said, you know what? I said, I don't have any male friends who do not take care of the children they bring into this world, and you men shouldn't have friends with them either. And I said, you black women should not give aid and comfort to a man who doesn't take care of his children by another woman, because if he doesn't, he ain't gonna take care of you. Those are the kind of, what has racism got to do with that? And it deflects attention away from the critical issues we face. The victimizer may have knocked you down, an abusive parent, racism, but the victim has to get up. If somebody mugs you and you wait for them to come back and nurse you back to health because it's injustice, they ought to take you to a mental institution. So no, if white people were to disappear and go to Canada or Europe tomorrow, tell me how that would change any of the problems that you see in these streets. You see what I mean? Black men are 6% of the population. We're 80% of the NFL. Is that discrimination?
Yeah, against whites.
And so, I mean, we have to start this kind of dialogue. But it's crippling to us to go around this country now and say that a little 4-year-old he was killed at his birthday party. But you don't hear about that. 11-month-old Dior Harris, a week ago, 11-month-old shot to death in her mother's car. But you don't know about her name. And so we're being hustled by race hustlers. They're flying in on their Learjets to protest, some from their $3 million homes. And so when they say defund the police, they don't live in neighborhoods where that is. My 29-year-old brother was murdered. My 23-year-old nephew was shot to death by a young man he grew up with. His 17-year-old niece was raped and murdered on the streets. None of them by white people. And so we got to be for real about this. And if that offends somebody, I don't care. But we got to push back against these race hustlers, I'm telling you, because it's not their children dying in those streets. It's grassroots people who are losing kids in these streets.
Mr. Woodson, at the grassroots level, how do we push back? Since we're talking black folks, how do we overcome the condition, literally the brainwashing that we're under because we live in suburbia, we got 2 or 3 cars, we got 4 or 5 big screen TVs, and we actually believe we've made it. And we're only getting the crumbs. Not that you're expecting anything other than the crumbs, but how do we get this mentality?
Well, that's what we're trying to do, and thanks to people like Steve and others, he's making this happen. This is where the Pharaohs and Joseph. I have been spending the last 4 days with some of the wealthiest people in this country, and they are open for this message now like they've never been before. And so I think there's an opportunity for us to come together, people who believe in the country, who believe in the values, who believe in self-determination. We are producing some curriculum at the Woodson Center. And that book, you all ought to read it because our young people need to know about heroes from the past. Black women who were born slaves who died millionaires. 2 black women owned all of Hollywood. And there are all kinds of stories. So this is where we're trying to, and the reason that we're here, we want to enlist you. We want to help you where you are, do what you do. And we want you to help us where we are to help us do what we intend to do. We'd love to have you a part of our Zoom meetings on a monthly basis where we connect grassroots people together with their counterpart from around the country. And not all of them are black. Some of them are brown and some of them are white. Because we got to de-racialize race and we got to desegregate poverty. If you're a junkie, you ain't no white junkie or brown junkie. You just a junkie. And when you get delivered from it, see, when our people come together, as I said, 80% of my closest friends are ex-something. And when we have our retreats and conferences, over the years, race has never come up because when they get together, they want to tell you about how they were broken and what they did to overcome that brokenness. See, that's what we ought to be talking about, not whether you are privileged or not. How are you going to tell people in Silicon Valley where they have 2-parent households, master's degrees, $180,000 a year median income, but the suicide rate is 6 times the national average? They got volunteer parents standing in front of railroad crossings because so many of the teenagers are jumping in front of freight trains. The leading cause of death in the urban community is homicide. The leading cause of death in poor whites is prescription drugs. So we want to get race out the way so Sylvia can reach out to white moms in Silicon Valley, white moms in low-income white communities, so we can bring them together, so we can talk about what we can do on a strategy to fill that empty hole in the hearts of those children that cause them to despise their own life to the point where they want to take it or take someone else's. Suicide and homicide are different sides of the same coin. But we're not going to be able to solve that problem if we have to look at each other through the prism of race. I love being this age because you really don't care. Am I right, Steve?
Yeah, you got it.
It's liberating. And I hope every one of you live to be as old so you can experience this. It feels wonderful.
I got a question.
Yes.
I got a nonprofit organization. And when you say grassroots, I think of our organization. Like, our organization is one of those organizations that never had a grant. Mm-hmm. We're active, just as active as all of those who do have grants. We don't have a staff, so we don't got no money. So what would be your advice for somebody like us who are just as active, who is just as productive and effective as everyone else? Because like you said a little bit about like people saying you're all over the place. We do Black History programs. We got a tutoring program. We give food away. We do everything that has to do with community, not because that's what we sat down and wrote out, but because that's what's needed. So whatever's needed, that's what we end up doing. So when it comes to us writing grants and trying to get money for specific things, we can't really get it. And then when, like, stuff that we do, we kind of pick up what's been there already and trying to revive it, because I remember that as a kid, because I'm born and raised in K-Land, where we at right now. Shout out. So it kind of like, it's kind of confusing on what people mean when they say grassroots and all, because we always get looked over. And like, for instance, when they say, what do you guys want to put a program together for? And then I do media too. I take pictures and I do videos and podcasts and all of this type of stuff. And through everything that we do, from Black History programs to now we're working on the Juneteenth, we're bringing all these different people together. So I'm able to reach out to different people. I'm not too far removed from the hood. So if there is an issue, I get a call. If somebody get shot in the K or in the Southeast, I get a call. Like, it's just a whole bunch of stuff that goes on that we do, that we can't sit down and just say, you know, this is what we want to do. And I kind of would like rather, how can I get somebody to invest in our organization and not the specific, like, each like little bitty things that, event.
Let me just tell you, the reason that we're here, sitting here, is because this man said, Bob, would you come out here and help me to find you?
Well, I'm here, baby.
I'm telling you, that's exactly why we're here. Steve said, Bob, I've heard about the Josephs of this world. Do we have them in the Springs? I said, I don't know whether I know you have them, and I can help you to find them. Curtis and
Talk to that man
Sylvia
right there.
have been traveling around looking for you. Because the quality that make you effective makes you invisible. Because you're too busy working. You ain't whining and complaining or picking at nobody. All you want to do is do the work. And so it's our obligation to find you. It's not your obligation to find him. All right? So we're going to be talking about to you.
Mr. Shuck, Mr. Woodson. My name is Jamon Galden. They call me G. Galden. D. Smith here has been a little bit too modest, okay? Because what you do, sir, is community development. And that's exactly what we do. That's exactly what D. Smith does. And it started out with community resuscitation, if you will.
Right.
Because this community was headed down a bad road. We call this community K-Land, and the whole south side and the whole southeast is what they call it now, but it's the south side, and it's K-Land. It's the neighborhood where we grew up. I was born in Compton, California, and the violence is really bad, poverty and things like that. So when we moved here, can I be honest with you, this wasn't much better. I'm talking about 30 years ago, Pastor Lee. 30 years ago, we're talking about prostitution and drug dealing, violence, and all of that. So we had to resuscitate, and it's people like the late Sam Dunlap and Pastor Promise Lee right here. Those are the reasons why we do what we do. That's the reason why we're here. That creates the D. Smiths and Pastor Shoup here. That creates the people who do community activism here. So what D is saying is that it's more than an event. We do need some money for the event.
Right.
We need the Juneteenth, so write that down, the Juneteenth. But no, it's more than that. It's a whole movement. It's not event by event, because that is the wall that we've been bumping into. They say, how much do you need for this? And how much do you need for the Black History program or the backpack giveaway or this and that? We do everything. And I'm alongside of this gentleman trying to make things happen, more so in the music, arts, and entertainment realm. But it's always event by event. And what you just said is a mouthful, sir, that we need someone like you guys, to help us to cultivate the movement.
That's why we're here.
Yes, sir.
That's exactly why we got on the plane and came here, because this man has been bugging me forever. Bob, come to my town. I'll help you where you are, but if you come help me where I am. Because what you need to do, you all need structure, you all need help, so that you can do 5 times the things you're doing now.
That's exactly it.
You see? That's what, so you can do 5 times, 10 times, and there should be other people like you in this community who can come together, working with existing leadership.
Right.
We come in to help you. It's like that one commercial said, we don't make balls, we make them bounce higher.
There you go.
We don't make paint, we make paint brighter.
All right.
So we ain't in no conflict with nobody.
Right.
But I people with the means, and I shake them down as often as I can.
All right.
But I shake them down for you. And that's the difference. Yes, sir. Okay.
Mr. Woodson, we have had a wonderful time with you, and we could go on and on and on. We want to honor your time. Hopefully you have some books with you so we can maybe do some signing. And this is just an appetizer for tomorrow. Is that right?
Yes.
Steve?
Yeah.
This is just an appetizer for tomorrow. Are there any more questions before we conclude this? Going once, going twice? All right.
That's okay. I have more.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Can we give Mr. Woodson and Mr. Shuck a great hand?
They can't be looking for you. Let me get a picture with you. Hey,